Uh-oh. And welcome back to Janky AF. Well, here I am on the side of the road. Transit's just started overheating. It had a slow coolant leak, but apparently I wasn't taking, good enough care of it. I didn't even notice. I was listening to something in the radio, and all of a sudden you hear this little kind of whirring, swishing noise, and then I looked down and said, "Holy shoot! It's hotter than Hades in there." And so pulled over. Hopefully I didn't blow my engine up. And luckily the little lady in the Volkswagen came to rescue me. Oh boy, this might be the start of another car roulette, I have a feeling. I'm waiting for the great AAA people to show up. And I checked it, had oil the other day. It's been a little while. It's been having some trouble passing inspection. And but I checked, the oil was fine the other day. It had oil in it. The coolant has been slowly leaking. Also seemed to have a brake fluid leak, so that's pretty great. So, oh boy, might be a big bill down at the shop. Oh, so we'll get this figured out. But Janky do thanky. So there's lots of smoke and other things coming out of this area. Lots of great smells. Now I did have kind of a very slow leak going on here, so I keep a bottle of coolant with me. And obviously the coolant was very low. I just checked the dipstick, and that does have plenty of oil on it. I'll wipe it here. So that's good. At least I didn't run it dry on oil. The coolant is another story. It was definitely overheating. And then I trying to think level-headed, got out, let it cool down a little bit, opened the coolant cap up. And boy, it looks like my brake fluid is low again too. Just leaks going on everywhere, leaking like a sieve. So obviously here's your max and min level here, and then I put more coolant in it, and I thought maybe it had to drain into the engine, but then it just kept going down. Every time I added more, it just kept going down. And if we look under here, there is some moisture, and it looks like some coolant is kind of dripping out of there. So maybe it's, I don't know if I'm gonna need new lines and everything. On top of that, yeah, we have the other brake fluid leak going on. Hasn't passed inspection for a year. We tried to get it passed in December, and the monitors were not resetting themselves with the EGR and the catalytic converter. So hopefully we don't need a new cat, but transit's hurting right now, I'll be honest. So I don't know, what do you think I should do out there in Janky land? This thing's an iconic vehicle. People know me all over town. They know exactly where I am at all times. I don't want to kind of get rid of it because, it's sort of iconic to the Janky brand. Not that I couldn't get another yellow vehicle, but the Transit is near and dear to people's hearts, we shall see. Janky do thanky. Well, it ended up turning into quite the scene. We had a great little lady there jamming out to her tunes, and then the great Kenny just happened to be driving through. So the nice thing was he stopped, and he was going to, in the direction of our house. So he took the little lady home, and then I was left with the Volkswagen all to myself, and I had some other chores to run. So that was actually quite fortuitous. And then as we see, the tow truck came and scooped it up not too long after, and we got it out of there, and the whole situation was resolved. So now we are going to give you a little inventory of what exactly was done to the vehicle. It did go to the shop and had quite a bit of work done to it, and we'll tell you about that now. Janky do thanky. All right, and welcome back to Janky AF. We have here the wonderful invoice of everything that was done. So indeed, the coolant was leaking, and that was not due to a radiator or lines or anything like that. The water pump had actually failed, which makes sense because that pushes the coolant around. It was leaking out of there, so that makes sense. And the brake lines, I didn't know if the master cylinder or the actual container that holds the brake fluid is leaking. It was indeed a couple brake lines, so we needed to do those. So I'm just gonna reel off everything that got done here, and luckily the great shop has broken it into parts and labor. So we needed an oxygen sensor. And now in addition to this, keep in mind this car hadn't passed inspection in well over a year. I think it was May of 2021 that it was due, and then it didn't pass. I tried to get inspected in December. It didn't pass because it would leave these monitors and they would have to clear or reset before it could pass inspection. I drove the car, hooked it up to the ODB sensor, and I just couldn't get it to pass. These things would never clear. It was usually, now you can have 2 of them that don't clear, but you can't have 3. And I had EGR, CAT, and I think EVAP was the other one. And I ran Cataclean through it. I tried to keep the gas tank at a certain level, drive it, do all the things they say, drive it for so many miles at highway speeds, and then cruise through town and blah, blah, blah. They give you this rigmarole that you're supposed to follow. Tried to do all that. Nothing was working. And then I had an appointment to get this car taken in the day before it broke down. So in that way, it was like, all right, well, I get it towed up to the shop, and it's not really a surprise because it was supposed to show up the next morning anyways. But I got a little bit more than I bargained for. And it breaking down was sort of both a blessing and a curse because it forced my hand to get the work done. On the other hand, you'll see. So oxygen sensor, $149 right there. Water pump, $80, not bad. And then while you're doing the water pump, might as well do a serpentine belt, so that's $73.99. Front sway bar links, it was getting a little wobbly. Now, the car was pulling, it was really in rough shape. So front sway bar links, 2 of those at $59.99, it's $120. The other thing, which I didn't know, is that the whole rack and pinion steering rack was shot, apparently. So that was a big one, including shipping and handling, $427. Then we had a tie rod end, so 2 of those. The whole front end of the car was kind of falling apart. 2 of those at $89.99, it's $179. A brake line foot, that's 15 of those at $325, it's $48.75. 3/16 inch brake nuts, $12. Brake unions, brake fluid, $6, $4 respectively. Power steering fluid, $6.59. But it all adds up. So that's just your parts alone. Now, actually, the funny thing about this was, a lot of these automotive shops, their rates are not cheap. They're sometimes $80 to $100 and $120 an hour, and that's at an independent shop. That's not a dealer or anything like that. So the parts actually outweighed the labor in terms of total cost here. So I always think that's kind of, you get this huge bill from a shop, well, a lot of that. Now maybe they're taking a little bit of a percentage on the parts, but even so, they're going through the trouble of ordering them, and that takes time, which I understand. So the actual labor compared to the whole bill wasn't really that bad for how much stuff got done. So that always sort of impresses me, just as an aside, is that they actually, all the stuff that needed to get done that's quick. On this car, it was relatively quick. If I was to do all this stuff myself, aside from I would have had to teach myself, and so it's again, and unless you're like really a mechanic or just like have that knack for engineering and mechanical things, to do all this work myself, there's no way I could have done it as quickly as they did. So they did a little alignment, and the funny thing about the alignment was, of course, I've already lost the paper, but even after the alignment, at least one end of the car, so I believe it was like the front left, was still not within like the desired spec. And the car was still pulling even afterwards. Now that could have been because of tire rotation. It could have been the wheels weren't, balanced properly in the first place, yada, yada, yada. But they did an alignment, hand torque wheels to factory specs. Vehicle needs to be driven to set monitors again. Engine codes, so we have an EVAP, an exhaust temp out of range. Now that was probably because the vehicle overheated. Cylinder head temp sensor out of read codes range. Brake switch out of read codes range. Transmission control switch, and oxygen sensor signal stuck. Lean bank 1, sensor 2. Cleared all the codes. New York State Safety and Emission Inspection, $21. Now the thing I learned with the Aerostar is that if they do your inspection and it doesn't pass, they still have to charge you for it. And they don't make any money on that $21 inspection anyway, so that's sort of, I always feel bad taking it to a vehicle to a mechanic just for an inspection, because they're just, they don't make any money off that. Removed and replaced front to rear brake line sections, $133. That's probably like less than 2 hours of labor. Diagnosed, removed, and replaced water pump, filled coolant, and blood system, $133. Diagnosed, removed, and replaced front sway bar links, $89. Diagnosed, removed, and replaced rack and pinion, top off fluid, and bled the power steering system. Now, in theory, all this stuff is great because you're going to have service intervals anyways during the lifetime of your vehicle, and you should get all your fluids flushed and things like that. Even I struggle with this because it's so easy if the car is working just to go in and drive, but preventative maintenance is such an important thing. Like you have service intervals, and at these intervals you should get all your fluids flushed and all this stuff. It will significantly prolong the longevity of your vehicle. As I say this with a dying vehicle. Diagnosed, removed, and replaced rack and pinion, top off fluid, and bled the power steering system. $356. Now I would imagine to get that power steering rack in there, there's quite a bit of stuff you got to take out. I imagine that's a pretty complicated process. Being a complete layperson, I don't know that, but it just seems like it's tucked in with everything else in there. Diagnose, remove, and replace serpentine drive belt, $44. It's like they did that so quickly. Scan and diagnose engine codes, remove and replace the oxygen sensor, $89. Oil change, which I asked for. In addition, it was overdue, and while you're in there, type of thing. Change engine oil and filter, $35. No time at all. And that's the one thing, yeah, I could change my oil easy enough, but that's not really what you're saving on. You're not really saving a lot in the grand scheme of things with that. So, again, while you're in there. So, a total for labor, $991. Total for parts, $1,124. So, your subtotal, $2,116. Now add a great $167 in tax to the state of New York, and your grand total is $2,283.98. And the great part is that even after this was done, it still won't pass inspection. And one of the reasons I was bringing it in the first place was because the front end noise, now part of that was probably all the stuff that we discussed earlier, but also the wheel bearings, I'm positive, at least one of them's got to be going, because there's this loud like rumbling and buzzing and humming, and it's very speed dependent. The faster you go, the louder it gets. So that was not even addressed here. Now I think because these things when I told them that the car was going to get towed in, it becomes a whole nother set of problems that has to be dealt with. And I think I was kind of trying to get the car back. And so for whatever reason, the wheel bearing problem did not get addressed. I don't think the car was driven afterwards. I was in a hurry to get it, yada, 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 no problem. But the point of it is, after spending nearly $2,300, the car will not pass inspection and still has a lot of front end noise coming from the wheel bearings, which is a potential issue and potentially not a super cheap issue for wheel bearings. So almost $2,300 later, and the car is still not right. And passing inspection really bothers me, because if these monitors aren't clearing, then it could mean, one of the monitors is for a catalytic converter, which, then you're looking at at least another $1,000. So we are at the point now where, sad to say, we have to make sort of a head versus the heart decision here. I'm very attached to the Transit, but it may be time to make a change. Now, I have looked at trade values for the Transit and gone on Marketplace and looked up private seller values and done comps for the mileage and everything. It only has 130,000 miles on it. It's not sky high. And the transmission, which I've heard can be an issue in these vehicles, has actually been bulletproof so far. So we're going to have to make a decision here. And the Transit may not be long for this world, the janky world anyways. So that's where we leave it for now. We will, of course, update you on what happens in the future, but it's not looking good. Now, it is drivable right now. I have been driving it, but it instills zero confidence when I am doing that. I also hate the idea of getting pulled over and having to pay large fines for things and trying to explain to the friendly officers that, the sticky situation that I'm in. So there you have it. Trouble in transit town, indeed. And we'll see you again very soon and update you on everything. But Janky, no thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.